Welcome everybody. It's great to be here. I'm Cronan McNamara, founder and CEO of Crem Global. We're live here from the Bank of Ireland, Grand Canal Square, so thank you to the bank for hosting us for this kick-off meeting of the Predict conference series. So the conference actually starts today. So you might think, well, what does that mean? How does the conference start today? Well, that's because Predict is a different type of conference, and I'll come back to that in a minute. So today I'm going to talk for about 10 minutes to introduce the conference. Then we're going to bring in John Elder from Elder Research, based in Charlottesville, North Carolina. And he's going to give us a nice taster or preview of his opening keynote talk about predictive analytics and how it's having success in multiple surprising areas in business. So, on to Predict. So what is Predict all about? So we've been thinking about Predict for a long time. I've been working in data analytics for around 18 years now, and I think we're entering a golden age of data. Basically, the data age is upon us. There's so much data out there, so I think we all recognize that today, that there's just the amount of data is growing exponentially every day. This is a massive challenge, actually, but also a massive opportunity. So what we believe is that when decision makers can get access to that data, but not just the data, but predictive analytics and models in a form that they can understand, they can make much better decisions. So our vision in the Predict conference is a world where everyone can make better decisions based on real data and what we're calling expert models. And these are models developed by experts in data science in close collaboration with people with domain expertise in business in order to enable them to make better decisions. So the goal really around the Predict conference is to connect decision makers with data sets in the first instance, but also experts in data science in order to help them solve important problems. So we've been to a lot of predictive analytics conferences in doing research and over the years, and really sometimes you find that there's a lot of talk of predictive analytics, but they don't start from the value chain, right from the raw data. Where's the data coming from? Like open data initiatives, government data, research data, data coming from sensors. There's so much data. We want to understand where's that data coming from and enable people to access that data. Next, we want to talk about technology. What kind of hardware, software technology are people using? So we want to span the value chain right from data, through technology, through the analytical methods. What type of predictive analytics methods are people using? What kind of predictive models are they creating in order to exploit that data and help people make better decisions? And ultimately, Predict is all about decision making, enabling business people, government leaders, technology leaders to make better decisions based on data and predictive models. So we want to span that whole value chain right from the data all the way to better decisions. And that's what Predict is all about, joining the dots between all of those stakeholders and players in that area to enable this conversation, enable that networking, and enable people to make better decisions. So I mentioned that Predict was a different kind of conference. Actually, we're calling it a conference series, and a real conference experience. What does that mean? Well, you get the things you normally expect from a conference, and that's great speakers from all over the world. So we'll have 40 speakers from three different continents. You'll be able to meet those speakers. You're going to understand really great case studies, what they're doing with data, how they're making decisions. So that's the speaker series. That's kind of what you'd expect. Secondly, I'd like to tell you about the Connector series. So every attendee at the Predict conference can register for a brokerage event organized by Enterprise Europe Network, which is hosted in Enterprise Ireland here in Ireland and in 50 other countries around the world, in order to broker and pre-arrange meetings at the event. So if you want to meet data suppliers, if you want to meet people with expertise in certain areas of predictive analytics, you simply enter that in, and we will facilitate those meetings. Also, the speakers are going to be very accessible. This isn't going to be the kind of conference where the speakers disappear off the back of the stage. They're going to be available for meetings, available for networking. So that's very important to us. On to the knowledge series. So we understand that 2 days is a very intense period of time to try and absorb a lot of information. And also, we want people to be ready and prepared for those meetings. We also observed over the years that the people that get the most out of the conference, out of conferences, are people who've put in the most effort up front to really prepare for that conference and make the most of it. So through our knowledge series, we want to, starting today, and this is the first webinar in our Predict knowledge series, we are going to start the conversation and start the networking. And it's great to see so many people here in the Grand Canal Square branch of Bank of Ireland supporting this opening webinar, and there's many more out there on the web. participating. So what we want to do today is really kick off the networking, kick off the learning. So you're going to get introduced to John Elder today. You're going to understand what he's going to talk about, and then when we get to the event, he'll be much better prepared. Also, there'll be 2 more webinars coming up mid-July and mid-August, which we'll be announcing the details of very soon. Similarly then, following a 2-day intensive event, you get back to the office, you get back to base, and you're just back to the day job. You don't have time to really absorb the learnings. You don't have time to pass on the learnings to your colleagues. That's why we're going to create a full conference ebook to allow you to spend your time at the conference, absorbing the learnings, networking, enjoying the experience, and in this full knowledge that you're going to get a high-quality ebook at the end of it, which will help you revise the material and pass on that material to your colleagues back at work. There'll also be revision webinars set up on the topics that people are the most interested in learning more about. So that's the knowledge series. Finally, and maybe the most exciting of all, is the data series. So you don't just get to come to a great event, webinars, get an ebook, get all of this information, meet great speakers. You also get to experience live data innovation, both now in the lead up to the conference and during the conference and following the conference. So let me explain what that means. Attendees can submit a data set to us. We'll find an expert who can advise on, analyze, and if possible, create a predictive model using your data set, subject to suitability and first come, first serve, obviously. And we're going to showcase the 3 best examples of data and predictive models from attendees on stage at the conference. So that's a really exciting aspect. Furthermore, at any time during the conference, you'll be able to talk to a data genie, which means somebody with expertise in data science, which means you can go up and ask questions, consult them about data, consult them about methods and how to get the best out of your data. And finally, every attendee at the Predict conference is going to get access to the Expert Models data platform and support system, which is a really exciting initiative where you can actually submit your data online, collaborate with data modelers, create models, and get better output and learn from that. So I would like to say at this stage, that's all from me, and thank you to our supporters who are listed here, and there's many more partners and supporters in the pipeline that we will announce shortly, but so far, thanks so much to Sigma Recruitment, Boston College, Enterprise Ireland, IDA, Insight Statistical Computing, ISIN, the Innovation Network, the Irish Software Association, and CDAR, the Centre for Data Analytics based here in Ireland. It's great to have all these partners on board, and we look forward to working with you to make this conference great. So now I would like to introduce Dr. John Elder from Elder Research in Charlottesville, North Carolina, and he's got such a CV that I actually need to have some notes here to read it out. So we're delighted to have John Elder, first of all, as our opening keynote speaker at Predict. In his opening talk at Predict, John will reveal how data and predictive analytics are transforming business in a number of surprising areas, and we're going to get a sneak preview of that today. John is the founder and president of Elder Research, which is the primary data mining and consulting company in the US, which has offices in Charlottesville, North Carolina, Baltimore, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. And for 20 years or more, his team have applied advanced analytics methods in order to enable better return on investment across a range of business problems for businesses all over the US. He's co-authored 3 books on data mining, ensemble modeling, and text mining, and won 2 Book of the Year awards based on that. John will also present a full-day workshop on the 3rd day of the Predict conference, which is an optional extra, which I'd highly encourage people to participate in, and I'm certainly going to do so myself. And that's for those who are really interested in the nuts and bolts of predictive modeling. So learn from one of the best by attending the conference and subscribing to the workshop with John Elder. So without further ado, and bear with us for a little bit of handover here onto the webinar. And John is joining us now from Charlottesville, North Carolina. So over to you, John.
All right, I'm going to say show my screen. You let me know if it's working. And all right, can you all see my screen? I'm not hearing feedback, but I will fire away.
We see your screen.
Thanks for having me. Oh, you can see it. All right, great. It's a delight to be invited. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to talk about the power and the peril of predictive analytics. Mostly going to focus on the power, of course, but if we understand the ways that we can go wrong with it, you know, the powerful new tools allow you to shoot yourself in the foot even better than ever before. So, if you use it right, it can be extremely useful. I'll give just a couple of examples of it. We've used it recently in a very big data problem where a lot of measurements of pressure and temperature and so forth of all sorts of pipes we use to predict which natural gas wells were going to freeze up. Freeze makes it sound like it's mainly a temperature problem, but it's a temperature and pressure problem where they get clogged up with a particulate and it's an expensive and time-consuming procedure to unclog them and so forth. So if we could predict ahead of time where that was going to happen with greater accuracy, then save tens of millions of dollars with each time. We were able to do that very successfully, about 3 times better than the method they were using before. So you can see how predictive analytics has become so vital to so many companies when with a smart, hardworking project, you can have such immediate impact on the bottom line. And we'll go into a little bit of how we did that. But one of the interesting things about this project is all the data is, it's huge amounts of data. That's a flow of information. No single case or observation is of any use by itself. It needs its company of observations to do anything. And that's a pretty good definition of big data. And other problems, we do a lot of work in fraud detection, for instance, and we saved Hewlett-Packard, for instance, tens of millions of dollars over a few years in looking at fraud that was perpetrated against them. This is a screenshot from a tool that's used by the Postal Service here in the U.S., the Inspector General's office, which tries to help the Postal Service, and they have problems with having so many thousands of contracts that sometimes there's contract fraud, or there's medical benefits fraud, or there's all sorts of different ways. So we built tools that help visualize the situation, and here's a, not quite using real data, but inspired by real data, a map of the U.S. and where the problem spots are, where the color is the severity, the size of the dot is the likelihood of a problem being occurred. And we show also on the right-hand side sort of the link network of a selected, when you click on one of the cases that's possibly needing investigation, you can see the link of the actors, the people, and how they're connected and how risky they are, rolling up their scores from many other the contracts that they're involved in. So you can see if there's some kind of collusion going on there. You can see the history of the contract on the lower left and the size of the budget and proportion of things. These are all things that experts can use to zero in on where the problem is. And so this highlights one of the most important uses of predictive analytics or data mining, and I'll use those words interchangeably, and that is that to work on needle in a haystack type problems where the search space is so vast you don't have time to look at it all, and the computer can be trained on problems that have been identified in the past versus cases that are not problems, and distinguish between the two in a probabilistic way. It's not correct most of the time, but it can nevertheless give a look at every single case and rank it according to how likely there might be a problem, which provides a prioritized work list for the analyst, which allows you to use that precious resource of the analyst's valuable time as efficiently as possible. And this is tremendously valuable to investigators and people looking for fraud or waste or abuse, and improving the processes of your system. Another great example, we participated, like many did, in the Netflix competition. So that's basically the movie renting by mail. So if you like one movie, will you like another, and which one should we recommend to keep you happy? Netflix offered $1 million to the winner of the contest several years ago. It was huge. Lots of people on both sides of the Atlantic were working on it. Here's just a picture from one of the competitors that takes the 17,000 movies and the millions of people and combines all that information to project onto 2 dimensions which movies are alike. So if 2 movies appear close together in this chart, then they're very similar in the populations of people who like them. And so it's in some ways a fun chart to look at because we all have opinions about movies and how one might be a copy of another. And we can see there are certain clusters. But the one main point I wanted to point out about this is that you just vast dimensions that no one could ever visualize in their natural state can be transformed and processed in such a way that we can use our powerful visual abilities that we humans have that computers are nowhere close to yet developing the same ability to see the big picture. And so you can explore a space and you can make decisions, which is a huge benefit, but it also comes with some dangers of its own because we humans are quite easily fooled, and we really need to find the best way to work together. You know, the computers have certain abilities and powers. We have certain abilities and powers. They're very different from one another, and I love exploring how to best combine those. And to explore that theme a little more, we'll notice that this historical chart of Moore's Law, normally we think of that as just being the chip age where computers get twice as fast and twice as cheap every year and a half. Well, it's actually a little greater than exponential because you can see the log scale on the y-axis of the computer power is such that it's even faster than log scale. But even going back 100 years previous to transistors, if you look at vacuum tubes and solid-state relays and even the mechanical analytical engines developed in the UK and so forth, hopefully everybody's seen the movie The Imitation Game. I highly recommend it. It really touches on this issue very well. So the power of the computers is estimated to be about at a mouse brain currently, but if things continue this way, our best understanding of the human brain is at least power-wise, we might be matched in another decade or two. Of course, our understanding of the human brain, the more science advances, the more complex we understand the human brain to be. For instance, we have billions of what could be considered supercomputers. Each of our neurons is quite powerful, but nevertheless, as we can all see, the computing power is getting greater and greater with time. And where is this all headed? Well, there's some outcomes that are negative, and some outcomes that are a little more positive, a little helpful creatures. So how can we harness the power without succumbing to it? It's helpful to remember that the computer cannot do any creative things, really, as yet. It doesn't know context, has no common sense, it doesn't understand, and it doesn't care. So we have to have people that have all of these things working closely with computers. But there's also some downsides that we have to thinking analytically, and there's a great book out by Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner in economics, and a very fine fellow. He's a good researcher and speaker and writer, and he talks about the current mental model of the brain as having 2 systems. One is fast and analytical, fast and intuitive, and the other is slow and effortful and analytical. And we try to use that slow one as little as possible. You know, it's phenomenal how much of the day we get through just on instinct and reaction. Our learning, we jump to conclusions, and we learn very quickly from a few examples. Well, that helps with our survival, but it means that we're not really the best at making careful distinctions between things, which is, of course, one of the great strengths of a computer properly set up. So I just want to end with a caution on our own abilities so that we have the proper respect for the computer's strengths and weaknesses and our own and find the best. And I just want to tell one story of one of the cognitive biases we have, something called a halo effect, which is illustrated well by this example. Now, what I have pictured here is a phone booth, or for the younger audience, a isolation chamber with a tethered cell phone. That's in New York City, the U.S.'s largest and most bustling city, where folks are not known for being friendly like they are here in the South, in the U.S. And in that, an experiment was run where as someone was stepping out of a phone booth, a researcher would drop their papers. And it being New York City, a very, very small proportion of people helped that person out that had an accident right in front of them. In fact, it was only 4%. And natives of New York have told me, yeah, and they weren't from around there. They were, they must have been visiting. But a small change was made to the experiment, which resulted in 88% of the people helping. And the change was very slight. It didn't change the researcher, didn't change the paper, didn't change the time of day. The only change that was made was that prior to someone entering the phone booth, a dime was left on the shelf. And at the time, it took a dime to pay for a phone call. So the person got a free phone call as a sort of a positive surprise. And then minutes later, when they're done with their phone call and they open the folding door and step out, now they're 20 times more likely to help that poor person out, which is astonishing. So marketing actually works, and it's not a rational thing that's happening. Something is going on there where a positive thing has happened, and the halo effect from that positive thing affects your next action even minutes later, even though it's a tiny, tiny influence. So we are affected and buffeted by these things all the time and completely unaware of our biases. And so that is one of the ways we have to caution. Well, it's just a pointer that analytics, properly done, is not easy, and it's vital to making rational decisions for a company. And if I have time during the address, I want to focus on one more thing, and that is, and I think I'm going to be giving a small talk on this and certainly talking about it in my workshop, but there's a real problem in science, experimental science and learning from data, is that it's done wrong most of the time. The Economist had a great cover article on this a year ago, 2 years ago almost, where they pointed out that probably a majority of papers that make discoveries from data saying to do with medical relationships between certain diet and certain disease and things like that, probably a majority are false. And the estimates are actually as high as 95% are false. This is just scandalous, and the article does a great job of pointing out the problems. There's two classes of problems. One is sort of the economics and the politics of science, and the other class of problems, which is about half the problem, is just data analysis and doing it right. Well, the good news is the tools are there to do it right and to solve that half of the problem immediately. So hopefully we'll have a chance to go over that and how to do it right, and I look forward to just meeting everyone.
Thank you, John. And that was a really interesting overview of very diverse areas of predictive analytics and the interaction of people with predictive analytics. And I think that's really key. And that is also what this conference is about. So people with expertise in medical science can collaborate with people with strong expertise in data science, like the likes of John Elder and his team, in order to make sure that these kind of data problems and statistical problems will not arise. So we have a few questions for John. And I'm going to start my screen sharing and have a look for these questions. Okay. Ahmed, any questions from the webinar? Okay, we have one here. So John, a few questions for you, and just we'll have to hand over the sound to you now in a moment. So first question is, what is your best data modeling tip?
Okay. Well, let me mention that I had a very exciting moment kind of early in my career after my PhD and before starting the company. I spent a little time as a postdoc at Rice University in Texas, where I went as an undergrad and loved it. But I had time there where no one was really caring what I was doing, and I had the opportunity, which is a very unnerving situation if you're used to being very productive. But I had the opportunity to explore and solve a problem from many different directions and found this astonishing breakthrough that if you build several different models, competing models to solve the same problem, and combine their estimates. You can do better often than even the best individual model, even if you could predict ahead of time which one would be best. So that idea has become the idea of ensembles, and it's become very popular. I have a book on it, and it's a very simple idea, and you can get a great deal of the benefit from the idea with just simple versions of combining, like averaging or voting. And then, of course, my book goes into much more complex, more sophisticated ways if you have the time and budget. But that would be my number one thing is don't solve the problem just once, solve it several times, and we'll go over that in the workshop as well.
Definitely agree with that one, John. I think those brute force sometimes and ensemble methods to try and solve problems are really, really powerful. Another question came in here, and it is, what is the most counterintuitive thing that you found in your data analysis? So maybe something that you really couldn't believe and you had to go back and double check the data, triple check, and then finally you had to realize that the data was actually right and it was maybe counterintuitive to what you would have thought.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it really does take that communication back and forth between the data and the owners of the data. The problem is our brains can believe anything, can build a story around it. So if you're told that heat is good, then you can come up with a story for that, and cold is good, well, I can explain that too, and I've got some crazy stories about that. So you do have to verify. Your intuition is good for guidance, but the data is sort of authoritative. I would say the example we worked on was for Hewlett-Packard, looking at fraud, and they had a sort of a shelf problem that we got around to after we did some work on their primary problems, which is something called fault not found. Laptop's returned, there's nothing apparently wrong with it, and long story short, we discovered that it seemed to be, that, and later turned out to be, the hidden policy of some very large international consulting firms to claim something was wrong with their laptop right before the warranty expired, and thereby get a brand new laptop for free. And this was very counterintuitive in the sense that, while not illegal, it was certainly a violation of the arrangements between the companies, and previously the consumer electronics firm believed these companies to be their best customers, not their worst customers. So there were some very serious CEO to CEO discussions, all coming from a strange thread in data. No one said, go look for this, but it came out from some anomalies in the data that were tenaciously followed. And I would have to say, to be an analyst, that you have to have that Sherlock Holmes kind of instinct of following up with strange clues to see where they lead, and all like a bloodhound all the way to the end. But that would be a good example.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions from the floor? One final question from the web, if not, and that is, what advice would you give to someone just starting out on their journey in data science?
Well, you've chosen a good field to go in. It's extremely popular now. I think worldwide, with perhaps the small exception of the U.S., it's the #1 job sought on LinkedIn and things like that. I think it's #2 in the U.S. for some reason. But the and of course, lots of people claim to do it. But the great way to start out would be to figure out if you like it or not. Take some training. Of course, there is this workshop coming up at Predict I would recommend, and but there are lots of online sources and massive courses, massive online courses and things like that. Some good books out there. But the main thing would be to start getting your hands on some data, making analysis, and data analytics, predictive analytics is actually a very team-oriented event. You need to have good people skills, or at least somebody on your team has to have good people skills and communication skills. But it involves learning about the domain, asking the right questions, poking at the data, coming back and talking to people before you really have something shiny and beautiful to talk about while it's still messy and in the works. Just forcing yourself to have those communications and try out some things There's some great contests you can do on Kaggle, Kaggle.com, to see how you stack up and see what the problems are like. And those are near facsimiles to real-world problems. They're not quite the same because they've done all the hard work of setting up the problem and the criteria of merit for you and so forth. But you know, start trying it out and seeing if you like it. If you like it, you're going to learn quickly. If you learn quickly, you'll succeed, and the demand is there.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much, John. I think we will bring. Thank you very much, John. We're going to bring that Q&A to an end. So thank you again for participating in our webinar today. It's been great to have you on board, and we look forward to seeing you in September. So John will kick off the Predict conference with his keynote talk. So more of the same, more really great, interesting examples of where success is happening in predictive analytics and the risks in terms of people's biases and their ability to work well with data and computers. So looking forward to see you then, and thank you, John. So that's it from us. Finally, just want to wrap up. Thank you for everyone who came here today. Thank you for everyone who joined us on the web. It's been great to kick off this webinar series. We look forward to seeing all of you in September in Dublin, 15th to the 17th, and thank you very much and have a great day.